This week, crime reporter for the Daily Telegraph, Mark Morri, revealed a resignation by a chaplain from one of Sydney's most elite schools. And Mark Morri joins me live now. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Mark, Knox Grammar in the spotlight yet again. Tell us about your findings.
I was given information that the head chaplain there was involved in a relationship with another religious teacher, instructor, was involved in this relationship, as I said, actually in 2019. She left the school and then went to nearby Barker. But it since emerged that earlier this year there was information given to the schools that the pair had perhaps was still seeing each other in some form. Once I contacted both schools, they then told me that both of them had now left their positions at the school. Now, Knox were very quick to point out that the chaplain is in fact from the Uniting Church and not employed by Knox, although he's referred to as the head chaplain there. So again, they wouldn't tell me when, and it's this case I think of they weren't going to say anything until it was obvious it was going to be public, which is their form, again, is to not let people at that school know exactly what's going on. And, you know, this is, again, a terrible thing. These are the people who are supposed to be teaching the morals to these young men and women at both of these schools, and they actually seem to be doing exactly the opposite from what they've been teaching.
So, I mean, on a general scale, what is the difference in finding information between a public, independent and Catholic schools?
I think I'm still learning a little bit of this because it's not really my area of expertise. But I do realise with a public school, the minute you start asking questions, you then refer to the education department and they come back with answers, sometimes slowly, but they give you answers. And you also have the right. We could GIPA, or under the old Freedom of Information is how it's referred to. You can get all this information. Now, those private schools are not held to that sort of accountability. And that's why the gang scandal, as we say, that's where we found a whole lot of young men involved in some atrocious online behaviour and posts from racism, misogynistic, talking about child sex, all of that. They kept that quiet, and even now asking questions we can't get because they're not accountable. A public school, they would have to let us know exactly, you know, when and who they reported it to. A lot more information. They have a lot more accountability. Now, Knox gets $10 million a year or so from the federal government. It's taxpayers' money. And a lot of these private schools get a lot of heavy subsidies from the taxpayer. And I believe they should now be held a lot more accountable for what they do, and their interactions should be told to the public with our money, even though I know, you know, there's a lot of heavy school fees for these private schools.
You did mention that there's a lot to learn with these sorts of cases, but Mark, what are you hearing from the parents, like when you're investigating these stories? Are you hearing that there needs to be more transparency? Are you hearing from the teachers at all as well?
So what I did find is, once we wrote the story about the chat room called Gang, which was in a different type of app that you and I would ever use. There was one called Disjoin that a lot of young people. I was then flooded with emails, some anonymous, some from very angry parents who have had bad experiences with some of the private schools that they were talking about. I had one person contact me and said that there was a rape list at one of the schools. This was actually a school, not even in Sydney, but in rural New South Wales, which I couldn't really establish. It appears there was some sort of truth to it. But what it did show me is there was a lot of displeasure at the way Knox had handled this, that they are not the only school that has a lot of has problems with racism and these type of posts in private chat rooms. Soon after that, I think Cranbrook came out and said they've had to take action against some students. There was a video, again, an anti-Semitic video posted. So what it's done is opened up a whole field of I think, a problem that needs to be addressed across the board. And it's not addressed by just expelling kids. It's addressed by, moving them to another school is not the answer. So I think, the education department, the private schools, they all need to start looking at, heavy education programs, some form of monitoring. I don't know how you do it without stepping all over, teenagers are, their privacy is their God-given right. If you ask them, they believe they shouldn't even have to tell you what time it is. So there's a whole lot of issues that we have to address to look after their safety and other people's, and at the same time not alienate them, with too harsh restrictions on them. But there's got to be a way to monitor what they're saying and doing in some of these chat rooms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because it's a balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to be sort of, monitoring their every move. You've got to have that level of trust.
Yeah.
But then there's also the people that are not trustworthy that are getting into these apps, and then your child or someone might be vulnerable in that situation. It's 24/7. They're in their bedroom or what have you. It just, it just doesn't stop. So I think it sounds like you're right with the education, the programs, but that, it's not easy.
It's an absolute minefield, isn't it? That I never really had to negotiate, and I've saw it as my son was growing up. And now I with this story, it's shown me this whole, we talk about the dark web, and the dark web is something you keep thinking of sinister people and drug dealers and grown-ups. But there are young people who know how to use the dark web, and then in that space are predators. These pedophiles, that they now can come in and get into the bed, into your lounge room with your kid 24/7, as we were saying. Whereas we used to say, don't talk to strangers, when you're out on the street. Well, now it's like, don't talk to strangers on your computer, maybe. But that's not the modern world, it's totally different. So I think the parents have to really try their education at home. And as you said, you can't be on them 24/7. They've got to learn to grow up and everything. As you said, that takes trust, and that's a difficult thing to do when you don't even understand what world they're in now. But schools particularly should be able to really ram home some of the dangers. And they should be aware of what's going on, and I'm sure that they could have not just education programs, but they would have ways they could perhaps monitor a little more closely than, say, a parent about what's going on in cyberspace in their pupils, in their students' world.
Yeah, it's a world that is not going anywhere, unfortunately. But yes, we have to be vigilant. We have to be able to trust and educate and all of that in a matter that is a balancing act. Mark Morri, always great to speak to you. Talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.